Trae Young has showed me things this season that I didn't exactly think I would be seeing from a 21-year-old player. A lot of people were quick to call Trae Young a bust last season after he had a bad summer league. Trae Young let everybody know that they should keep that same energy and that he was going to come back stronger and better than ever. It's like people quickly forget how good somebody is. I have to say that we as people do suffer from something called recency bias. And I don't only think we suffer from this as basketball fans. Again, I think we suffer from this as people in general. Recency bias is the phenomenon of a person most easily remembering something that has happened recently compared to remembering something that may have occurred a while back. And I mean, I'm guilty of it too. Who doesn't love a good hot take? But sometimes we have to keep our hot takes in check and realize greatness when it's presented in front of us. Trae Young at Oklahoma was one of the best college basketball players I'd ever seen. He wasn't just a prolific scorer, but I mean, he could have been, and he would have been fine. He would have still been one of the best college basketball players I'd ever seen. But Trae Young was much more than that. Trae Young started to receive comparisons to Stephen Curry, and the hype was real. NBADraft.net said Trae Young, early on in his freshman year, was doing things that college basketball fans rarely see. Through Oklahoma's first 10 games, he averaged nearly 30 points and 9 assists, which is unheard of for any player, let alone a freshman. The doubting for Trae Young started early, much before the summer league. Due to Trae Young's size and stature, a lot of people thought he may not reach his potential. Some thought he just might not be able to get his shot off at the NBA level. Some thought he wouldn't be strong enough. And despite being a quick and crafty player, some simply thought he wouldn't be athletic enough. Now, that's not to say that Trae is a flawless player, because no player in the NBA is perfect. But in his second season, Trae has been doing his best to prove everybody wrong. Capitalizing on a monstrous rookie campaign in which Trae Young averaged 19.1 points and 8.1 assists, Trae Young is currently averaging 28 points and almost 9 assists per game. But you have to look at how he's doing it. And currently the team he's doing it for. As it stands, the Atlanta Hawks roster is terrible. I wanted to say they were bad, but when you look at this team, it's just really not good. And you see why this team is near the bottom of the Eastern Conference. Despite Trae Young putting up numbers that would be good enough to win MVPs in past years. But of course, I'm not the only one who's noticed how bad the Hawks roster is and how poorly they've been playing as a whole. In my 5 blockbuster trades video, I talked about how players would like to showcase their skills at the highest level, how they want to prove to everybody that they're the best, and they have what it takes to win that championship. Well, let's call Trae Young one of those guys. Let's call Trae Young one of those guys that wants to be the best, that wants to win that championship. You see, when it's all said and done, Trae Young knows what he's doing. In his second year, this is special. He knows he's going to have his hands on a ton of records, but he wants more. It was reported that frustration has been mounting within the Hawks organization at times, and league sources say it resulted in an emotional locker room scene that involved star point guard Trae Young following a recent loss. After a 130-118 home loss to the Brooklyn Nets, one high-ranking team official was seen telling Trae Young that the team would be getting him some help on the roster soon. According to multiple sources, see, when you have a player of Trae Young's caliber, you have to take the good with the bad. And the bad isn't as always as conventional as you think it might be. This video, I'm going to be talking about how Trae Young can ruin the Atlanta Hawks' future. But before we get into that, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, guys. You will not want to miss another GETLIKECOOP video. And that's facts. I'm trying to get to 200,000 subscribers so I can go full time, guys, and bring you guys daily content. So be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. I do plan to make more trade videos, guys, so I want you guys to comment down below on what trades you guys think are likely to happen this season or you would like to see happen. And I'm talking about big trades that are video worthy, because I am doing the theme trade videos really soon. Also, be sure to follow me on IG, guys. Handle GETLIKECOOP. You will not want to miss another post. I'm sure a lot of people came into this video thinking I would be talking about how Trae Young could possibly demand a trade. But this video, I'll be focusing on the opposite of that. For one, most players don't demand trades when they're on their rookie contract, regardless how bad their team is. You may have some players who really don't want to play for a team on draft day, but I think that's a different situation. I mean, Steph Curry was supposed to be a Knick, right? Anyways, I think most players don't do this because they really don't realize how good they are, and of course the way the contracts are set up in the NBA. Of course you do have players who are content with their situations that they're drafted to and are content going through the developmental phase. As a matter of fact, I think the development phase is one of the biggest players and why you see players so content to play out their rookie contracts for bad teams. Players aren't entirely sure they're going to be stars yet, and of course a lot of guys do take longer to develop. But you see, Trae Young in already his second year is already in very elite company. He's almost a 30-point per game scorer, and if he wanted to be, I'm sure he could be. But you see, Trae's 28 points a game and 8 or 9 assists just simply isn't enough. Not only are the Hawks one of the worst offensive teams in the league, sporting the 25th worst offensive rating, they're also one of the worst defensive teams. As a matter of fact, they're almost as bad as the New Orleans Pelicans and the Washington Wizards, who are the two worst. Now again, I don't bring any of this up because I think Trae Young's going to leave, but I think the Hawks feel the pressure of an accelerated clock with Trae Young being so good so fast. I think in the NBA that sometimes GMs have this internal clock in their head in which they have to win. And if a team isn't successful in winning by this time, then that GM or team could potentially lose its star player. I think this may be what's going on with Trae Young and the Atlanta Hawks at this time. I think Young's comments may have just been of competitive nature, and he's a guy that's really good that just wants to win. But if Atlanta takes this to heart and they rush a rebuild, they could potentially ruin their future. Currently, I don't think the Atlanta Hawks roster is very good, but that doesn't mean that it can't be good in the future. The Hawks have a lot of players that just need some time to develop and some time to play with each other. Sometimes continuity goes a long way in developing a team. We've seen teams rebuild the right way like the Golden State Warriors and take things sort of a step at a time. Sometimes making sure you rebuild the right way can be more important than the assets you acquire that may only be there for temporary wins. It's hard to argue against what the Golden State Warriors have done because they became one of the best teams in NBA history. Patience should be of the essence in the NBA. You have to draft well again. You have to sign players that make sense. You don't want to just be a completely young roster. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You want to have some veteran signings. You want to have guys that can fill some roles. And you want to have a structure in place that can lead to a winning environment. You see, when the 76ers tore everything down and they were bad, they saw that they were going to be mediocre for a really long time. That's why they invested in the process. And they tried not to skip any steps. But honestly, throughout the whole thing, they acquired so many assets that they could afford some misses or take some risks on big players. The process would be abandoned and the results still remain to be determined. The Oklahoma City Thunder at their peak are another example of a team that definitely went out and built the right way. For the most part, you can see it with the Spurs team. You can see it with a lot of teams that have relative success throughout the NBA. I also like what the Nuggets have done. But for every team like the Denver Nuggets, the Golden State Warriors, or somebody like the Boston Celtics, you have teams like the New Orleans Pelicans, who's actually my favorite team right now. When you look at the Anthony Davis era, you look at nothing but a rushed rebuild. They wanted to win and they wanted to win now. The Pelicans would do nothing but trade assets like their picks for players like Omer Asik, who, no offense to Omer Asik, just wasn't a great move for the long-term success of the franchise. Now, I know the Pelicans also had terrible injury luck, but even without the bad injury luck, you could tell that the team wouldn't be set up for long-term success. I have to say the trade for Boogie, though, was a good one, despite it being one of the luckier trades that I had seen until Boogie hit went down with the unfortunate injury. Again, at the moment, I think the Atlanta Hawks roster is not very good at all, but I do think they have talent on that roster that can develop if given a chance. DeAndre Hunter and Cam Reddish offer upside despite not being elite players so early in their career. Cam Reddish has been bad, but it'd be silly to rule somebody so young out so early. Jabari Parker has been showing massive potential this season, and then you have a big-time player like John Collins, who definitely has more steps to take before he reaches his final form. He's truly going to be a beast when it's all said and done. And what I've seen from John Collins this season is that he truly plans to take the next step on the defensive side of the basketball. Sometimes I do wonder what things would be like for the Hawks if they did take Jackson Hayes instead of Cam Reddish. I think the highlights would be somewhat never-ending. Herter looks like he can be a solid role player also. The Atlanta Hawks will have room for 2 max free agents in the 2020 NBA season. And as a matter of fact, this offseason could be the most important for the entire future of the Atlanta Hawks. If Trae Young truly pressures them to go out and spend money in what doesn't look like the best free agency class, they could walk away with giant regret. I'll never forget when the Pelicans offered Solomon Hill a bag that would be forgettable, and ultimately handicapped the moves the Pelicans could make. But to be on the other side of things, I would love to see the Atlanta Hawks go after Bertans, who's a prolific scorer from the three-point line that's having a career year. He's currently shooting 46%, hitting threes of absurd difficulty. If they were able to get him along with Andre Drummond, things would get interesting. They would also still have a high draft pick and could actually end up sporting 2 firsts at the 2020 NBA draft. But again, I'd rather see the Hawks play the long game. You have Trae for a long time, and you should use that to your advantage. I can't think of a much worse situation than going win now mid-season and losing out on a high draft pick while also losing out on assets. LaMelo, Wiseman, Edwards. It's all a possibility. I'd much rather see the Hawks turn out like the Raptors as opposed to the Detroit Pistons. They have assets and they need to be smart and not feel forced to use them. Be sure to click the video on the screen right now, guys. It's me going over 5 blockbuster trades that could definitely happen this NBA season. Be sure to subscribe, turn noties on. I'm GETLIKECOOP, and I'm out.